Some people, most people, they don't recognize the bricks and mortar of life. And this, to me, is such a waste of spiritual potential, because what does it mean to be a spiritual being? It means to employ the highest force of creativity that is possible among people. That isn't what changes people. No one talk will change a human being. No one experience is usually enough to change a human being. I said usually, but not always, because sometimes life or the Holy Spirit or some outside force comes in to bring a change to some people's lives, and from that moment, they can usually tell the exact moment it is, their life is changed, they're different. The definition of a person with a golden heart is someone who lives in the presence of God. And living in the presence of God means to live in the spirit of love. And to do that means to pay more attention to the needs of other people than to your own. Not to neglect your own, of course, because a person who is unable to take care of himself or herself certainly isn't going to be able to help anyone else. And so in Eckankar, we look to see people develop into strong human beings.
Hi, beautiful souls. Welcome back to my Journey Faith for Compassion Hub. If you are new here, my name is Beatrice, and this is a place where we journey together exploring spiritual truths that help us grow in love, in wisdom, and a deeper awareness of who we are as souls. On this channel, I enjoy listening to the timeless talks of Harold Klemp and reflect on them. Not simply repeat what was said, but to share what has touched my heart, what has challenged my thinking, and how these insights can help us grow in our everyday lives. Whether you are a student of Eckankar or from another faith, or simply searching for a deeper spiritual understanding, I hope these reflections can encourage you to pause, to look within and discover the guidance that Divine Spirit is offering in your own life. So today I would like to invite you to join me as we listen together to one of Harold's seminars on spiritual freedom. As we go along, I'll pause at different moments to share my thoughts and reflections that came to me while I was listening. Perhaps some of them will resonate with your own journey as well. So, let's begin.
The talk this morning is what is spiritual freedom? And it's a difficult topic to talk about because we know in the grand scope of things, spiritual freedom means to be free of whatever it is that are causing us problems here. And you say, okay, take that for granted. But most of us, even though we have problems every day of a kind that make us bitter, angry, and fearful, if we were to trade this in and someone says, would you like spiritual freedom if it meant that you left Earth permanently? Well, then people hedge and they say, well, we're not real eager about such a thing. I'm looking for spiritual freedom later, maybe, when I'm 105 or something. And so, what is spiritual freedom? Well, in the ultimate sense, yes, there is an ultimate state of spiritual freedom, and it brings wisdom, love, and power, spiritual power. But it's not to say that between this everyday working condition that we live in and ultimate spiritual freedom, nothing happens. It's either no freedom or complete freedom. It isn't that way. It's like we expand or unfold into a greater state of spiritual freedom.
When Harold asked, what is spiritual freedom? I found myself reflecting on what I used to believe. For many years, I thought spiritual freedom simply meant having a personal relationship with God, staying away from sin, living a righteous life, and one day reaching heaven. And in many ways, I still believe these are beautiful and important. That's a beautiful aspiration. But as I continue listening, I realized that Harold wasn't asking whether we have a relationship with God. He was inviting me to even look deeper. He was inviting me to ask myself, how does the relationship with God change the way I respond to everyday life? Because if I truly believe God is with me,
Does that bring peace when life becomes difficult? Does it change the way I respond when someone hates me? Does it help me trust when things don't go according to my plans? Then I found myself thinking about all the way we imagine freedom. We think freedom means having no problems, having no sickness, no difficult people, having no financial pressure, no disappointments at all. But as I continue listening, I realized Harold wasn't talking about escaping life. He was talking about seeing life differently. And that touched me so deeply because perhaps spiritual freedom isn't only about where we are going one day. Perhaps it's about who we are becoming today. Let's continue listening.
I was going to mention some of the terms that we use here in Eckankar. For the Holy Spirit, we use the word ek. Why? Well, ek is an old word that refers to one, which means one, back in the Greek language and earlier. Ek, the Holy Spirit, is the creator. The ek provides the bricks and the mortar. I'm up here to point them out to you and say, those are the bricks and that's the mortar, because some people, most people, they don't recognize the bricks and mortar of life. But all I do is point these things out to you, and it's up to you to use the bricks and mortars to either build blocks or stepping stones. So you see this relationship between the Ek or Holy Spirit, my role as a spiritual leader, and your role as a spiritual being. Bricks and mortars of life, what are you going to do with them? The Holy Spirit provides them, somebody points them out to you, but it's up to you whether you use them to build blocks, stumbling blocks, or stepping stones. Very good point. The reason I mention this is there is a trend in society today, and maybe I've been beating this old horse too much, but people are always taking the bricks and the mortar, just slapping them down on the ground or doing nothing with them. And mortar hardens, and if you've got mortar hardening around bricks, you've got this big clump that's very hard, has sharp edges, bricks sticking out of it. Then people trip on it and they say, oh, it's somebody else's fault, And this to me is such a waste of spiritual potential, because what does it mean to be a spiritual being? It means to employ the highest force of creativity that is possible among people.
As I listened to Harold Klemp speaks about the bricks and mortar of life, I found myself reflecting again. How often do we ask God to change our circumstances when perhaps He's teaching us how to build with them? I realized life keeps handing all of us the same materials. Disappointments, unexpected blessings, pain, opportunities, loss, new beginnings. None of those decides who we become. What matters is what we do or build with them. Then another thought came to me. Perhaps we spend so much time asking, why did this happen to me? Maybe when the better question is, what can my soul build from these experiences? Because Harold reminds us that the Holy Spirit provides with the bricks and the mortar, but the soul chooses what to build. Interesting. A wall, a stumbling block, a stepping stone. That challenged me because I realized that two people can go through the very same experience. One becomes bitter and the other becomes wiser. The experience wasn't the difference. What they built from it was. And perhaps that's another step towards spiritual freedom. This part really challenged me. It's often easier to blame other people, our circumstances, or even God for what we are going through. But Harold gently reminds us that many of the situations we struggle with are opportunities to learn, to grow, and create a different response. That isn't always easy to hear, but it's also incredibly freeing.
Creative force, creative power means figuring your way out of a paper bag once you get yourself into it. That's what it means. And most of the time we find ourselves in trouble that we've made ourselves. This morning I was trying to figure out, how to put this talk together and make it all fit and still stay within a 30-minute limit, because I keep saying I've got to stay within the 30 minutes because, people want to go downstairs and have snacks and stuff after this, basically. And also, I understand that it isn't talking. I can sit on stage here and talk for 5 minutes, half an hour, or however long. That isn't what changes people. No one talk will change a human being. No one experience is usually enough to change a human being. I said usually, but not always, because sometimes life or the Holy Spirit or some outside force comes in to bring a change to some people's lives, and from that moment, they can usually tell the exact moment it is, their life is changed, they're different. And their friends and relatives say, before this, he used to shout at the television set, but now he doesn't shout at it anymore. He even turns the sound down, stuff like this, because the TV isn't competing with the person who's shouting. No need for that. And so the home then suddenly becomes a quieter, more peaceful place, a more loving place. I'm speaking about spiritual freedom, and I know that the brochure you got this morning says the golden heart. This is the topic. Well, it is the golden heart, because the definition of a person with a golden heart is someone who lives in the presence of God. And living in the presence of God means to live in the spirit of love. And to do that means to pay more attention to the needs of other people than to your own. Not to neglect your own, of course, because a person who is unable to take care of himself or herself certainly isn't going to be able to help anyone else. And so in Eckankar, we look to see people develop into strong human beings. Because until you become a strong human being, able to survive under any and all conditions, you're never going to be able to help anyone else. So this is a path for the strong. The meek shall inherit the earth, fine. But the strong shall go into the highest reaches of heaven. This morning, as I started to say, I was trying to put together the talk. I had started on it last night. I sat there and I looked at all the different pieces and notes and whatever else, just saying, okay, by roughly 10:30 tomorrow morning, you're going to be sitting on the stage, and then need to give something that's going to be of some spiritual use to the people who come here, all those who've come from even Nova Scotia on vacation, And so this morning I got up and I did my few routines around the home quick, and I went into my bathroom, and the first thing I saw was this huge spider, daddy long legs, on the wall. And I said, I'd seen him under a shelf in the bathroom about a week ago, but I said, as long as he stays under the shelf, I don't care. But this time he was walking around by my towel, my bath towel. And I said, this could be a bad mistake for both of us if I come out of the shower, grab the towel, and if he isn't a very strong daddy long leg spider, he's going to have a hard time as I crunch the towel, and then we're both going to have a fright when I try to dry myself with it. So I went upstairs, got a glass and a little index card, came downstairs, and this time, fortunately, he was very obedient. He stayed there. He was playing along. He's going to get a glass, take me outside. Hey, it's okay. Because spiders can always come back inside, They know how to do that. So it wasn't even a struggle getting him into the glass. And he was so big that his legs were sticking out from the edge of the glass. He looked more like a very malnourished tarantula. But I carried him out to the garage, and we have the automatic garage opener, so I opened our kitchen door, put my finger around the corner, and very carefully balancing this glass, I just laid the index card on top because the spider had been on the bottom of the glass. And I said, well, just for a minute here, I can take my hand off the top of the index card, reach around the corner, and press the garage door opener. And so I'm just coming into the garage, ready to go down the little steps. Here's a little landing. Press the button, and there's this enormous blue flash, okay? The light burnt out on the garage door opener, and it startled me so much that I almost dropped the glass, but I shook the spider out on the floor. The spider's on the floor. He's startled because he was planning to be taken out very gently and set on the ground. And here I've thrown him down 3 steps and almost threw the glass down behind him. So I said, this isn't going right. But every time something very startling like this happens, I know that there is a spiritual lesson in it. You know, there is something in it to see and something in it to learn. So I took the index card and I go scoot, 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 took about 4 or 5 scoots, and I had him outside. And then I said, well, as long as the garage door is open, might as well change the light so I can see to replace the bulb. Went inside. Now, I did a couple other things out in the garage since I was there, and our door opener has a 10-minute timer. So apparently, by the time I went back inside, brought out a new light bulb and screwed it in, it was 9 minutes and 55 seconds. Because as I put it up there, I screwed it in, the light went on for a minute and immediately went off again. I said, now I got deep problems. There's a short in the garage door opener. This morning I want to come here, and probably my garage door is going to be frozen in the open position, where somebody's going to be able to come in and get my lawnmower, snow thrower. I says, well, maybe that's not so bad. You know? But then it occurred to me that maybe there was something with the garage door opener. I said it'd be just like it. Sometimes these forces of illusion, which try to make us see things through a cloud and draw the wrong conclusions, maybe sometimes they're working stronger than at other times. I've already had a light burn out in me. I've had a spider. And now I put in another bulb, another burnt out bulb. But I went to the door where the opener is. I pressed it, and the light worked. And I said, boy, interesting timing. Within 5 seconds of a 10-minute span, I just turned the bulb in, the new one in, just as it's ready to turn the light switch off automatically. And I would have drawn the wrong conclusion, and I did for just a few seconds. But when this happened, I just opened myself and I said, what else could be wrong? Because a frozen garage door opener on a Sunday morning, just before you have to leave home, could be a problem, you know, unless you don't care too much about mowing the lawn or blowing snow away in winter, you know, then you don't worry about it. Maybe somebody will come and take these things away from you, and then you'll be done with it. My wife would be all too happy. You know, she doesn't want me to mow the lawn or do these things. You know, wives are like that. Spouses are like that, I think. There are studies done that have, no, of people who live alone live a shorter time than people who have someone else in the home, and it doesn't have to be a spouse either. Why? I think, well, the constant presence of somebody else's opinion about how you should run your life has staying power. You know, we hear things like, oh, we should have an easy life, not worry too much, not have too much tension. But under certain conditions, like with a spouse or somebody else nearby, maybe it's good, we live longer. If living longer is better. If we are still working on achieving the steps of intermediate spiritual freedom, then it's maybe okay to be with someone else so that we live longer and put more time in, so that we can learn the lessons that we would otherwise not get in this lifetime.
I have to admit, when Harold started talking about the spider in his bathroom, I honestly wondered, where is this going? Then suddenly I realized that the spider wasn't really the lesson. The real lesson came when something unexpected happened. The light flashed. Everything looked like it had gone wrong. Immediately the mind wanted an answer. Something is broken. Something is wrong. But Harold stopped himself. Instead of believing the first conclusion, He became curious. That moment deeply spoke to me. Because how often do we exactly do the opposite? Someone doesn't answer our messages. We conclude they are upset, they don't want to talk to us. Someone walked past through us without greeting. We conclude the worst. We are always concluding. The door closes. We think God has forgotten us. But what if nothing is actually wrong? What if we simply don't have the whole full picture yet? This reminds me of something I've been learning in this spiritual path. Soul doesn't need to react immediately. Soul can wait. Soul can observe. Soul can listen because divine spirit often reveals the truth a little later. So perhaps spiritual freedom doesn't begin the day all our problems disappear. Perhaps it begins the moment we stop allowing every unexpected event to disturb our inner peace. Maybe freedom begins when we stop reacting and start seeing with soul. Thank you for walking this part of the journey with me today. If something in today's reflection spoke to your heart, I would love to hear from you in the comments. What touched you? What challenged you? And what spiritual lessons are you discovering in your own life? Until next time, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. May the light and sound of God continue guiding your path. I love you all.